They called her too rough, said she was better off breaking horses than baking bread. But when an Apache hunter crossed her path, he saw what no one else did, and asked for her hand the same day. The punch landed square on her jaw, but Evelyn didn't fall. She staggered, spat blood into the dust, and turned back with fire in her eyes. The sun scorched the yard behind the saloon, but she stood tall despite the sting in her cheek and the jeers echoing off the porch. "Had enough, horse girl?" sneered Walter McGreevy, wiping sweat from his brow. His sleeves were rolled, fists tight, shirt soaked from the heat. "Or you want another go?" Evelyn cracked her neck to the side, shook her arms loose, and replied in a voice roughened by grit and dry air. "You punch like you shear sheep, sloppy and slow." The men on the porch hollered with laughter, but it was cruel, not kind. They didn't laugh because they liked her. They laughed because they couldn't believe she'd speak like that with a busted lip and a bloodied chin. A woman who worked like a man, fought like a man, dressed like a man, but wasn't one. "Should have known you'd like fighting," someone muttered. "Ain't no real woman anyhow." Evelyn didn't flinch at the insult. She'd heard it too many times to care anymore. In Siltwater, a woman was expected to bake pies, smile at strangers, and accept her place behind the stove. Evelyn preferred saddles to spoons and mending fences over mending seams. That made her an oddity. Worse, an outcast. She'd taken jobs no other woman would. Branding cattle, fixing barn roofs, clearing fields with a plough strapped to her own waist when the mule went lame. She carried an axe on her back and a blade at her hip, and neither were for show. But none of that mattered now. This wasn't about work anymore. This was about pride. Walter circled her, fists raised. He'd claimed she'd broken his brother's nose the week before when he grabbed her skirt, said it wasn't right for a woman to act like she had something to defend, claimed she needed humbling. So now, here they were, in the dirt behind the saloon, with half the town watching and not a soul stepping in. "Back down, Evie," one of the onlookers called. "Ain't worth it." But she wasn't listening. She took one more breath, then lunged. Her boot caught Walter square in the stomach. As he doubled over, she brought her elbow down hard against his shoulder and sent him crashing to the ground. Dust exploded around him, and the crowd gasped. Evelyn stood over him, panting. Walter groaned, rolled onto his back, and raised a hand in surrender, but no one clapped, no one cheered. They just stared at her like she'd broken some invisible rule, crossed a line no woman was meant to cross. She turned away, collected her coat, and limped toward the edge of town. Her horse waited tied to the post near the livery. Even he seemed to sense her silence as she mounted, jaw clenched, blood still wet on her chin. She didn't look back, not even when someone hissed, "Ain't no man gonna want that. Too mean, too wild, too masculine." She rode out of Siltwater with those words still ringing in her ears. The mountains ahead rose sharp and blue, like jagged knives carving through the horizon. She didn't know where she was headed, didn't care. She'd had enough of small minds and cruel laughter. She'd find work with her hands, sleep under the stars, keep moving till her bones gave out if that's what it took. But the wilderness didn't care what they called her, and neither did the man watching her from the ridge above. He crouched between two rocks, long braid trailing down his back, bow resting across his thighs. His eyes tracked her every move, not with judgment, but with curiosity. Her face was bruised, her stride limped. Her coat hung loose over powerful shoulders, built from years of labor. She wasn't like the others, and he wasn't afraid of her strength. He followed without making a sound. Evelyn rode until the sun dipped behind the trees and shadows stretched long across the trail. Her body ached, but she didn't stop. Not until she found the stream, barely more than a trickle weaving through the rocks, and slid off her horse with a quiet grunt. She knelt beside it, cupped the cold water in her hands, and pressed it to her face. It stung, but the pain cleared her head. That's when she heard it, a twig snapping behind her. She whirled around, hand flying to the knife at her belt. But the man didn't flinch. He stepped into the open slowly, hands loose at his sides. No threat in his eyes, just quiet patience. He was tall, lean, and calm as the moon. Apache. Wore no boots, only moccasins. His name would come later. But for now, he only spoke 2 words. You fight well. Evelyn blinked. She didn't answer. Not at first. Her mind raced, uncertain if he meant harm, uncertain if she should run, though something in her gut told her not to. He wasn't like the men in Siltwater. He hadn't laughed at her, hadn't spat or pointed or narrowed his eyes. He spoke with quiet conviction, like he'd seen everything and judged none of it. You were watching? She asked finally. He nodded. From above. Evelyn narrowed her eyes. Why? He shrugged. Curious. You ride alone. You strike hard. You carry no fear. She felt her hand relax from her blade. Doesn't mean I'm safe, she muttered. He nodded again. No one is. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The stream babbled quietly between them. The sun bled orange through the trees. Then he asked, You hungry? It caught her off guard. What? I have meat. In camp. Rabbit. Her stomach growled before she could answer. He smiled softly. The kind of smile that didn't mock, didn't tease, just welcomed. Come, he said, and turned. Evelyn hesitated, then followed. His camp was small, tidy, a fire pit nestled between stones, a woven mat rolled out for sleeping, and the scent of fresh meat roasting over coals. She sat slowly, back aching, while he handed her a strip of rabbit and settled across from her without a word. They ate in silence. Finally, she spoke. What's your name? Takoda, he said. She nodded. Evelyn. Another pause. Then he asked, Why do they fear you? She snorted. Because I don't wear dresses. Because I work harder than their sons. Because I don't cry when they want me to. Takoda tilted his head. They are weak. That caught her breath. They pretend they're strong, she whispered. But strength scares them when it looks like me. He didn't argue. Instead, he reached behind him, untied something from the pouch at his belt, and offered it to her. A single stone, smooth, polished, carved with a spiral. What's this? She asked, brows furrowed. Symbol of balance, he said. Strong and still, hard and soft. You carry both. She stared at it in her palm, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel ashamed. She felt seen, accepted, maybe even admired, but she couldn't have expected what came next. Takoda stood slowly, walked around the fire, and sat beside her. Then he said, without hesitation, You should not be alone. I will marry you. Evelyn's heart nearly stopped. She stared at him, stunned. What did you say? I will marry you, he repeated. Not because you need help, because I see you. She looked away, lips parting, throat tight. Don't joke with me, she said. Don't offer what you don't mean. I do not joke, Takoda said simply. I choose what is true, and I choose you. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, but she didn't walk away. And that was enough for now. Evelyn didn't sleep that night. She lay beside the fire, her fingers tracing the carved spiral stone Takoda had given her. The same stone now looped into a cord and tied around her neck. Each time the wind shifted, she caught the scent of him, pinewood, leather, earth, and it only unsettled her more, not because she feared him, but because she didn't. No man had ever looked at her like that before. Not with pity, not with lust, but with understanding, respect, even stillness. He meant it. He had offered marriage like someone offering a seat at a campfire, not because he had to, but because he wanted to share what he had. And Evelyn didn't know what to do with that. As dawn broke, painting the sky in silver and rust, she rose and found him already awake, sitting by the riverbank, hands folded over his knees. You didn't sleep, he said without turning. She frowned. You were watching. Takoda gave a slow nod. You dream with your eyes open. She didn't answer. Instead, She walked down to him, boots crunching on the gravel. "I need to ask you something," she said at last, arms folded. "Why? Why would you want to marry someone like me? You barely know me. I ain't soft. I don't cook well. I cuss when I hit my thumb with a hammer, and I've been told my handshake hurts more than a branding iron." Takoda stood slowly and turned to face her. His dark eyes were calm, unreadable. "Because you are not like them." "That ain't always a good thing," she snapped. He stepped closer. "It is to me." Something in his voice silenced her. No poetry, no promises, just fact, plain and steady. "You are not weak," he continued. "You are not afraid of work. You defend yourself. You protect your name. You walk alone into the mountains, unafraid of wolves, men, or hunger." He paused, then said gently, "But no one should walk alone forever." The words landed harder than she expected. She looked away. "I don't know how to be anyone's wife." "I don't need a wife," he said. "I want a partner." Evelyn's throat tightened. She nodded slowly and whispered, "Then don't expect me to change." I wouldn't ask it, and he didn't. They married that afternoon, not with a preacher, not with witnesses, but with a vow by the river, spoken under open sky. "I will not own you," Takoda said, placing a feather in her hand. "Only walk beside you." "I won't follow behind," she replied, gripping his hand. "But I'll keep step," and so it began. That evening, as the stars blinked through the darkening canopy, Takoda lit the fire and handed her a freshly cooked trout. She bit into it and tried not to cry, not because it was particularly good, but because no one had ever cooked for her before. "You always live alone?" she asked, licking her fingers. Takoda nodded. "Long time. Family?" He shook his head. "Gone. Disease came through my village. I was away hunting. When I returned, they were ash and bone." Evelyn's heart sank. "I'm sorry." He just stared into the fire. "They live in the wind now. I listen." She didn't press him. Not that night. Instead, she leaned against the log beside him and whispered, "Well, now it's just you and me, Hunter. Until the wind takes us too," he murmured. But the wind wasn't the only thing coming. The next morning, Takoda was sharpening his blade when Evelyn returned from scouting a trail and motioned for him to rise. "Someone's following us," she said under her breath. "Rider. One. Not close, but not hiding either. He wants us to know." Takoda's eyes narrowed. "What did he look like?" "Didn't see his face. Big man. Brown horse. Rifle on the saddle." Takoda stood. He didn't ask her to stay behind. He didn't tell her to wait. He just strapped his blade, slung his bow and said, "Let's go." They moved together, silent as deer, through the underbrush. Evelyn's hand never left her knife. Her eyes scanned the trail, ears perked like a predator's. Takoda moved like shadow. Then, from the bend in the trees, came the crunch of hooves on stone. And then, his voice. Evie. Her blood froze. She knew that voice, even after 3 years of silence, 3 years of running, she knew it. Lyle, her eldest cousin, and the man who once held her down while his brother laughed. Takoda sensed her shift and stepped between her and the path. Lyle appeared on horseback, eyes scanning the trees lazily, until he saw them. "Well, I'll be," he drawled. "Didn't think you'd come this far up the ridge, Evie. Thought maybe you'd come to your senses and gone back to town, where girls like you belong." Evelyn stepped forward slowly. Takoda moved with her. "I don't belong to that town," she said coldly. Lyle smirked. "You sure? They've been talking about you. Some say you went feral. Some say you married a savage." His gaze drifted to Takoda. Evelyn's jaw clenched. "Watch your mouth." But Lyle just chuckled. "You always were the wild one. But this is low, Evie. What would Ma think?" "She'd spit on you for following me," Evelyn snapped. "What do you want?" Lyle's smile vanished. "You left a mess behind," he growled. "Broken nose, broken pride, and a town that thinks you ain't right in the head. I came to bring you back." "No. You don't get a say." I said no. Lyle reached for his rifle. Takoda's arrow was notched and aimed before the butt even cleared the holster. "You'll die before you blink," Takoda said, voice like stone. Lyle hesitated. Then he smiled again, slick and snake-like. "Maybe. Or maybe I just come back with others. That town's not too fond of her, you know. Be a shame if they thought she was being kept against her will by a savage in the mountains." He wheeled his horse around. "I'll be back," he spat. Evelyn didn't move until he was out of sight. Then she turned to Takoda. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know he'd come after me. I didn't—" He touched her hand. "No, shame in being hunted. Only shame in not standing." She nodded, eyes hot with fury and fear. They would not run. Not again. That night they made plans. "Tomorrow," Takoda said, crouching by the fire, "we move. Higher up, near the stone, cliffs. Harder for riders, easier for watch." Evelyn didn't argue. She'd lived long enough on her own to know when a storm was coming. And this wasn't just wind and thunder. This was vengeance. "Do you think he'll really come back?" she asked, voice low. Takoda looked at her solemnly. "Yes." She closed her eyes and exhaled. "Then I hope he brings enough men to carry each other back down the mountain." Takoda almost smiled. He handed her a second knife, his spare. She tucked it into her boot without a word. The next morning, they moved camp, packed only what they needed, carried the rest on their backs. The cliffs Takoda mentioned rose like giants above the forest, jagged and steep, with narrow trails and shadowed hollows that swallowed sound. Perfect for an ambush. Evelyn helped build the new shelter, tight, cold, but hidden. Then she set traps, sharpened spikes, and tied bell lines across the trees. "Not much of a honeymoon," she muttered. Takoda handed her a strip of dried meat. No better way to learn each other. She chewed in silence. But inside, her heart was pounding, because she knew Lyle. And she knew he wouldn't come back alone, and, when he did, he'd bring more than fire. He'd bring poison, and he wouldn't leave without blood. That night, Evelyn lay beside Takoda, eyes wide open. He reached for her hand and whispered, "You are not what they said." She turned her face toward him. "What do you mean? They call you hard, harsh, but I see your fear, and you carry it anyway. That is strength." She swallowed the lump in her throat and leaned her head on his shoulder. "I've never felt safe," she whispered. "You are now." They didn't speak after that, but neither of them slept, because deep in the woods below, a branch snapped, and this time, it wasn't a deer. The first sign they weren't alone came with the bells. Takoda had strung them tight between trees, small rusted ones tied with sinew, and hung low near the knees and ankles. No ordinary wanderer would trip them without notice. And sure enough, just before dawn, the faintest clink echoed through the canopy. Evelyn sat up instantly, hand on the knife in her boot. Takoda was already crouched by the fire, unmoving. Eyes open, listening. Then, another bell, sharper this time. "West Trail," he whispered. Evelyn nodded. He didn't tell her to stay behind. He handed her a bow. It wasn't hers, but it fit in her hands like it had been waiting for her. They moved together, low and quick, ducking under brush and stepping between roots like dancers in a well-rehearsed routine. When they reached the bluff that overlooked the western slope, Evelyn caught her breath. There were 3 riders, and one of them was Lyle. She recognized his posture, the arrogant lean in the saddle, and the way his rifle bounced against his thigh like it belonged there. Too long, too loose. A tool he didn't deserve. "Got to be close," one of the men below muttered. Lyle spat. "We follow the bells. That freak's got him strung all over like some jungle sorcerer. I say we burn the trees if we don't find her soon." "She might be long gone," another replied. "You sure she's worth all this?" Lyle grinned. "She's mine." That single word made Evelyn's blood boil. Beside her, Takoda whispered, "We wait. Let them walk into the trail. The cliffs will funnel them. Evelyn's hands trembled slightly as she notched an arrow, not with fear, but with memory. These men had called her it, had joked behind her back, had thrown mud when she passed, and worse when she didn't. She had let the shame keep her quiet. Not today, not again. Below, Lyle and his men dismounted and started up the narrow path that twisted into the ravine beneath their camp. Takoda raised 2 fingers. Wait. The men climbed slowly, unaware they were entering a trap. And then Evelyn saw it, one of the spike traps they'd laid just before nightfall, camouflaged with moss and branches. One rider stepped forward. Snap! His scream ripped through the forest as the sharpened pikes bit deep into his thigh. He collapsed, thrashing. The other 2 froze. Ambush! Lyle shouted, drawing his rifle. But Evelyn was faster. Her arrow flew, clean, precise, and slammed into the tree beside Lyle's shoulder. Not a kill shot, a warning. Next one goes through your neck, she called, stepping into view. Takoda appeared beside her, bow drawn. Lyle stared up, face red with rage. You! He hissed. You're going to regret this, Evie. Wrong again, she growled. I regret not doing this sooner. The second man reached for his gun. Takoda's arrow lodged in his hand before the weapon cleared its holster. He dropped to his knees, crying out. Lyle grabbed his wounded friend and scrambled back down the trail, dragging him and cursing the whole way. Evelyn and Takoda stood still until the forest quieted again. When the sounds of their retreat faded into nothing, Evelyn slowly let her breath out. I should have finished it, she muttered. You didn't need to, Takoda said. Now they know where we are. Let them come. We will not run. Evelyn looked down at her trembling fingers. She hadn't missed. She'd chosen not to kill. And that, more than the fear, made her feel powerful. For the first time in her life, she hadn't run from the men who tried to control her. She stood, fought, chose, and Takoda had stood with her. Over the next few days, they fortified their position. The trap was reset. Bell lines doubled. Escape routes mapped. Evelyn crafted a second bow, smaller, faster. She learned to listen like Takoda, pauses in the bird calls, shifts in the wind, echoes that didn't match. They were hunted, yes, but they were not helpless. One night, while carving an arrowhead, she asked quietly, "Why didn't you kill him?" Takoda didn't look up. Because he didn't come to fight, not yet. He came to threaten, and men like that, they always return. You think they'll bring more? He nodded. Yes, a bigger group, maybe townmen, maybe those who want the land. Evelyn stared into the fire. Then we don't wait. He looked at her. We go to them, she said. We end it on our terms. Takoda considered it for a long time, then slowly nodded. Yes, but not yet. The next morning, Takoda led her deeper into the mountains, past a creek that ran like a silver thread through stone, and into a narrow cave hidden by a curtain of vines. Inside were the remnants of an older time, Apache relics, worn carvings, sun-faded feathers and polished bones set into crevices. This place is sacred, he said. Evelyn stepped lightly. Yours? My family's. My father's people made their final stand here when they were driven from the valley. Her voice lowered. And you brought me here. You are family, now. Evelyn touched the smooth stone wall, overcome with awe. Then she saw it. Paintings. Faded, yes, but clear. One figure with braids, bow in hand, facing a great many enemies. Another beside her, taller, holding a spear. The pair stood on a cliff, above flames. What's the story? She asked. Takoda smiled faintly. They were not warriors by birth, just 2 who chose not to die lying down. Together, they led the last defense. Their names are forgotten, but their story remains. Evelyn looked back at the image, and somehow she didn't feel so alone anymore. They returned to camp that evening and found the warning. A wolf, strangled and nailed to a tree. A sign. "They've been here," Evelyn whispered. Takoda walked forward, untied the animal, and whispered a prayer under his breath. "This is no longer a game," he said quietly. "They are coming, soon." "Then let them," Evelyn replied, voice steady. But that night, sleep did not come. She lay awake, Takoda at her side, staring into the dark. She thought of her childhood, of being told to be more ladylike, to wear softer clothes, speak quieter, smile more. She thought of the mockery, the laughter when she chopped wood faster than a man, the shame when she dared wear trousers to town. She thought of the time her uncle slapped her for refusing a suitor, and she thought of Lyle dragging her cousin's old name through mud in the name of honor. They'd taken her family, her reputation, her home. But they would not take this, not her life, not her peace, not the man beside her. The next morning, she and Takoda rose before the sun. They moved silently down the ridge and followed a game trail, east, toward town, not to surrender, to see, to count their enemies. They reached the edge of town by midday, hiding in the tall reeds near the river bend, and what they saw confirmed Takoda's fears. 5 riders, armed, camped at the far end of the valley. Lyle was among them. So was Sheriff Brenner. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. The sheriff had always looked the other way when men insulted her, when her cousin struck her. He called it family business. Now he stood laughing with Lyle like old friends. "They paid him," she muttered. "He's here for a bounty." Takoda's jaw clenched. "They want to take you," he said quietly. "To make you disappear." Evelyn stared for a long moment, then turned to him. "Then we make sure they disappear first." They returned to the cliffs that night, prepared, laid new traps, poisoned the lower water flasks, cut ropes that led to dead ends. Takoda shaped spears from ash wood and taught Evelyn how to hold a knife so it could turn into a shield or a blade depending on the moment. She memorized every line of the ground, every bend of the trees, every stone with blood beneath it. By the time the sun rose again, she was ready, and when the first rifle shot cracked through the silence, Evelyn didn't flinch. She rose, grabbed her bow, and whispered, "They came to take a ghost." She smiled grimly. "Let's haunt them." The smoke came first, a dark line curling up from the trees in the lower valley, faint but unmistakable. Evelyn spotted it just after sunrise, her gaze sharp and unwavering. Takoda saw it too. Neither spoke. It meant only one thing. They were burning their way up. "Cowards," Evelyn muttered, tightening the straps on her quiver. "Too afraid to face us straight." Takoda didn't smile, but his voice was steady. "Fire is not courage, it is desperation." Together, they moved, swift and silent. Takoda grabbed the pouch of crushed sage and crushed blackberries. His war paint. He dipped his fingers in and gently streaked lines across Evelyn's cheeks, down the bridge of her nose, and beneath her jaw. Not to disguise her, but to prepare her. To mark the moment. When she did the same for him, her hand didn't tremble. They were no longer hiding. They were ready. And the men coming up the mountain were not. Lyle had returned with 5 others. Sheriff Brenner, a bounty hunter named Jeb Vickers, known for tracking escaped men and dragging them back with bloodied wrists. 2 younger ranchers from Coldstone Bluff, barely old enough to shave but armed like soldiers. And a preacher from the mining town, oddly enough, with a pistol at his side and hate in his eyes. "Devil lives up here," the preacher had said when they first lit the torches. "She's taken a savage for a husband and made war on decent men. That ain't nature, that's corruption." Lyle, sitting tall on his horse, didn't argue. He just said, "Burn 'em out." They'd set fire to the lower brush trail, thinking to flush their prey into the open. But Evelyn and Takoda had moved days before. The camp was empty, their trails erased with pine ash and water. What Lyle didn't know was that he was walking straight into their new ground, terrain chosen for one thing only: control. The mountains narrowed into a canyon choke point. Thick stone walls rose on either side like fangs. There were only two ways out, forward or back, and both had been rigged. As the hunting party trudged up, the smoke curling around them, Sheriff Brenner called out, "Evie, girl, this is your last chance. Come down peaceful. We can settle this." From the trees, Evelyn let an arrow fly. It struck the tree 2 feet from his head. Not a miss, a message. They went silent. Vickers raised his rifle and fired back toward the ridge. Nothing. Then, above them, Dakota's voice, low, cold. "This land will not carry your blood kindly." The men cursed and bunched together, watching all angles. Brenner snarled, "Split left and right, flank 'em." But that was what Evelyn had hoped for. The moment two of them, one of the boys and the preacher, stepped into the brush, they vanished through the ground. Crash. Dakota's pit trap swallowed them whole, wooden spikes dulled just enough to wound, not kill. One screamed. The preacher didn't. "Help!" the boy shouted. "My leg!" Brenner spun. "Get 'em out!" Lyle growled. "No time! We push forward!" But the preacher groaned out one final word. "Snake!" A sharp rattle cut through the ravine. Evelyn had placed a basket of disturbed rock right by the pit's edge. And inside it, a rattler waited, coiled and hungry. The screams that followed sent a chill through even Lyle's spine. Brenner turned pale. "We can't. This ain't law. This is a curse." Vickers wiped sweat from his brow. "Forget the bounty, man. Let 'em rot up here." But Lyle wasn't listening anymore. He drew his revolver and shouted, "Evelyn, you think you're some kind of man? You think that savage is your equal? You're still just a girl in pants." Evelyn stepped into view from a boulder above, bow drawn, eyes blazing. "And you're still just a coward with a gun," she said. She fired. This time, the arrow grazed Lyle's shoulder, enough to rip skin and knock him from his horse. He fell back with a growl, clutching the wound. But the distraction worked. Vickers spun and fired. Dakota ducked, but the bullet clipped his upper arm. "Dakota!" Evelyn cried, rushing to him. "I'm all right," he grunted, pressing his hand to the wound. "Shallow." They retreated up a second trail, weaving through hidden brush and drawing the remaining men away from the pit. Only Lyle, Brenner, and Vickers remained. They gave chase. Evelyn and Dakota led them up through the hanging rocks, another trap point. They passed the carved stone they'd painted earlier that morning. As the pursuers reached the rise, Evelyn pulled a cord. Snap. 3 massive logs rolled down from their tethers, tumbling toward the narrow passage. Vickers shouted, "Dove aside." Brenner wasn't so lucky. The sheriff's horse reared, threw him, and one log slammed into his side with a sickening crunch. He lay moaning, not dead, but broken. Lyle didn't stop. He kept running uphill, blind with rage. Evelyn climbed higher, Dakota behind her despite the blood soaking through his sleeve. They reached the old Apache shrine by midday. The sun burned above. The canyon below was silent again, smoke still trailing far beneath. Evelyn turned, and there stood Lyle. Dusty, bloodied, gun raised. "I should have married you," he spat. "Tamed you." "You never could have handled me," she said. He grinned. "Maybe not, but now I'm going to kill you and take your scalp back as proof. They'll make me a hero." He cocked the gun. Dakota moved forward, but Evelyn raised her hand. "No, he's mine." She stepped down toward Lyle. No bow, no blade, nothing in her hands. Just her eyes. "You remember when we were kids?" she asked. "You laughed when I beat you at archery, told everyone I cheated, made sure the school teacher kept me off the team." He blinked. "You said, I'd never be anything but a freak, she said, stepping closer. That I was too rough, too loud, too much like a man. He lifted the gun, aiming it square at her heart. Turns out, she whispered, you were right. I am too much for you. Then she moved, faster than he expected. She ducked left, grabbed the branch she'd wedged into a rock earlier that morning, and pulled. The net trap snapped shut. Ropes flew from the stones above and yanked Lyle straight, off the ledge, hoisting him by the ankle. The gun flew from his hand. He dangled upside down, screaming. Takoda appeared beside Evelyn. They stood together, staring up at the man who had hunted them across days, burned the forest, called her things. No human deserved, what now? Takoda asked. Evelyn was quiet. Then she walked up and cut him down. Lyle crashed to the ground, groaning. Get up, she said, and walk back to town. Tell them you failed. Tell them I spared you. He looked up, dazed. Why? You could have... Why? Because killing you would make me like you, she said. And I'm done being anything like you. She turned her back and walked away. They returned to camp that night, Takoda's wound cleaned and bandaged with pine pitch and moss. He sat beside the fire, wincing now and then, but still strong. Evelyn was quiet, sharpening a blade. He watched her for a long time before speaking. You had the chance. I did. You chose mercy. I chose peace. He nodded. Then, after a pause, he said, I have nothing to offer you. No gold, no land. She looked up. You gave me freedom, she said. And you stayed when no one else would. That's everything. He reached into his satchel and pulled something out. A necklace, made from carved bone and strung with turquoise. Simple, elegant. I made this before we met, he said. For someone worthy. She stared at it, speechless. He rose, walked over, and tied it gently around her neck. I don't need your hand, she whispered. But I offer it anyway, he replied. And under the moonlight, without witnesses, without vows, without the world telling her who to be, they married, not with pomp or laws, but with truth. Two souls, forged in fire, joined in quiet understanding. The next morning, Lyle limped into town, filthy and bruised. He told a twisted story, claimed they'd ambushed his men, claimed Evelyn was possessed, but no one believed him. The sheriff couldn't speak. Vickers rode off without a word. The townspeople stopped whispering, and Evelyn, she never returned. Not to that place, not to those eyes, but stories did, of a woman, with braids and a bow, of a man who walked like the wind, of two outlaws who weren't outlaws at all, just free. Weeks passed. The fires left behind a scar, blackened stumps and grey ash where green once thrived. But from the ashes, new things grew, tiny wildflowers, brave shoots of pine, life returning in defiance of what had tried to kill it. Just like Evelyn. She didn't speak of what happened to many, and Takoda, true to his nature, never pressed. They lived quiet, their rhythm simple. Hunt, build, tend to the land. She taught him how to trap rabbits using wire. He taught her how to interpret bird calls like signs in the wind. Their bond deepened in the silence, in a glance, in the way. He put his hand on the small of her back when they walked across unstable ground, and in the way she wordlessly took his bow whenever she saw his arm start to throb from the gunshot wound. He never asked her to be less, and she never asked him to be more. But peace has its price. It always does. It began with smoke again, but this time not in the trees, in the distance, past the ridges, from the east toward Dry Creek. Takoda saw it first, standing on the stone outcrop where he prayed each morning. He didn't say a word, just watched the sky grow grey. Evelyn joined him, squinting. That's not natural. No. Another fire? No, he said softly. Smoke like that. It comes from Holmes, she turned sharply. Someone burned a village. He nodded once, gravely. Dry Creek. That smoke carries grief. They set off within the hour. By dusk, they reached the outer edge of Dry Creek, or what was left of it. The homes were still standing, mostly, but windows had been shattered, doors kicked in. Horses and carts abandoned in the road. There was no fire damage here, but something worse: silence, no children, no dogs barking, no singing, no movement. And then the scent hit them. Gunpowder. Blood. Burnt hair. Takoda went first, checking corners and peering into doorways, his movements precise and solemn. Evelyn followed, blade in hand, her bow strung and ready. And then came the sobbing. Faint. From a cellar behind the blacksmith's barn. Takoda raised a hand. Evelyn approached slowly. She lifted the cellar door, and what she saw made her stomach drop. 4 people. 2 women, a boy no older than 10, and an elderly man, all trembling, all hiding, faces pale with terror. "It's all right," she said gently. "We're not here to hurt you." They flinched at her voice, but Takoda stepped beside her and raised an open palm in peace. His calm was like gravity, anchoring them. The elder whispered, They came out of nowhere." "Who did?" Evelyn asked, crouching beside him. "The riders. They weren't from here. Wore masks. Had rifles like army men. Took anyone strong enough to walk. Said they needed bodies." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Where did they take them?" "South," the boy piped up. "I heard him say down to the canyon. Said something about mining." Takoda looked at Evelyn, face grim. "I know that canyon," he said. "Apache lands. Abandoned now. Too many died there. The spirits won't rest." "Sounds like the perfect place for men like that to hide," Evelyn said. "Especially if no one else would dare go." The old man caught her sleeve. "You can't go down there. You don't know what they've done. I've seen men like that," Evelyn interrupted. "And I've beaten worse." She stood. Takoda only said, "We ride at dawn." That night, while the survivors slept in the barn, Evelyn and Takoda sat by the edge of town, sharpening blades and preparing packs. Evelyn spoke first. "I always thought if I ever saw something like this, I'd freeze up, be afraid again." "You're not?" "I'm angry," she said. "I'm angry that the world thinks it can just take people." Takoda nodded. "It always has, but the earth has a memory, and sometimes it calls for justice." She looked at him, brow furrowed. "You believe this is justice?" "I believe we are being asked to do something, whether we want to or not." She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "If I don't make it back." He turned sharply. "Don't," he said. "You need to know." "I already know," he said, voice firm. "And I am not burying another part of myself." She blinked. "I'll bring you back," he said, "or I'll stay with you there." For once, she had no answer. They reached the canyon by midday. The air changed as they descended. The wind fell away. The sun seemed harsher, the stones more jagged. No birds sang. They spotted the guards first. 4 men lounging near a rusted mine entrance, talking loud, armed. Evelyn crouched low, surveying them. "No masks. These aren't the same as before." "No. Replacements," she frowned. "They're expanding." Takoda nodded once. "We move quickly." They struck at dusk. Evelyn crept through the rocks like a ghost, loosed an arrow through the throat of the loudest guard. Before the others could react, Takoda dropped from the ridge above with his war club in hand. 2 more fell. The last ran. But Evelyn tackled him before he could scream. She pinned him, blade to his throat. "How many inside?" she demanded. 50, maybe 60, he gasped. "They got a whole operation, digging for silver, useless mine. They just want free labor." "Who leads them?" "I don't know his name. Big man. Scars down his face, speaks all fancy-like. He's not local." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. She struck the hilt of her knife against his head, just hard enough to knock him out. Takoda looked to her. Ready? She exhaled. Let's bring them out. The mine was deeper than they expected. They lit torches. The air was thick with dust and the sound of chains. Then they saw them. Dozens of people, women, men, children as young as 10, all shackled, all gaunt with hunger and exhaustion. A woman collapsed as she swung a pickaxe. A guard snarled and raised a whip, but it never struck, because Evelyn shot him through the heart. Chaos broke loose. People screamed. The other guards charged, but Takoda was already among them, moving like a spirit of vengeance, silent and deadly. Evelyn cut chains. Run, she barked. Go, get out of here. A boy grabbed her sleeve. My sister, they took her upstairs. Evelyn nodded. We'll get her. They pushed deeper. At the heart of the mine, through a broken wooden door, they found the main room, lit, with oil lamps, a map on the wall, crates stacked with rifles and coins. And the man with the scar. He looked up from a ledger. Well, he said calmly, this is unexpected. He wasn't what Evelyn expected. Tall, lean, dressed like a banker, not a bandit. His voice was smooth, dangerous. You're the ones making trouble, he said. I'd heard stories, the girl with the bow, the ghost, warrior. He stood slowly. You've disrupted quite the profitable venture. Let them go, Evelyn said. Or what? He smiled. You'll shoot me? Brave, foolish. Then he clapped once. From the shadows, more guards emerged, 6 of them. Evelyn's hand went to her quiver. But then, bang! Takoda fired a stolen rifle. The scarred man jerked as the bullet slammed into his chest, and Evelyn was already moving. She spun, loosed arrows, struck 2 guards before they could fire. Takoda dropped the rifle and lunged with his club. Evelyn grabbed a broken pickaxe and swung it like a sword. It was brutal. Quick. By the end, 6 lay dead, and the man with the scar gurgled on the floor. You can't. Stop it, he coughed. She crouched beside him. Try me. He smiled one last time, then died. They freed everyone. It took hours to carry the weak and wounded out of the mine. Takoda found water. Evelyn found strength she didn't. No, she still had. When dawn broke, they stood on the ridge, the survivors behind them, the mine abandoned below. Evelyn turned to the people. You're free now, but freedom's not just about leaving. It's about deciding what you'll do with what's left. A woman stepped forward. You saved us. No, Evelyn said. You saved yourselves. We just helped you remember you could. The boy from before stepped up and took her hand. My sister's safe because of you, he said. You're not like anyone I've ever met. She knelt before him. Good, she whispered. You shouldn't be like anyone else either. That night, they camped under the stars. Takoda watched the firelight flicker in Evelyn's eyes. You never asked for this, he said. No, but maybe I was made for it. You were made to survive, he said. But now, maybe you can live too. She looked at him, and for the first time since all this began, she smiled, soft and unguarded. Maybe she could. They returned to the mountain cabin, but it wasn't the same. Evelyn knew it before they even crested the ridge. The silence was wrong. The ground was too disturbed, hoofprints marring the earth in panicked patterns, the stable door hanging ajar, chickens scattered where they shouldn't be. The dog, Takoda's, a mutt named Pebble, wasn't at the gate like always. She stopped mid-step. Her fingers closed around the handle of her blade. Takoda crouched beside her, pressing his hand to a fresh boot print. Riders, he said softly. Heavy. At least 6, not Apache. Evelyn's throat tightened. Someone came looking. They advanced in a crouch, eyes sweeping every tree line, listening for the crunch of leaves or the clink of stirrups. But the cabin seemed still, not quiet, still, like it had been emptied. Dakota reached the porch first, stepping up with slow, calculated care. Evelyn scanned the hill behind them one last time before following. Her foot hit something soft on the top step. She looked down, a leather pouch. Inside it, 7 silver coins, clean, government minted. Her breath caught. This wasn't robbery, she murmured. Dakota opened the door. The inside had been tossed, not ransacked in a desperate search, but deliberately ruined. Chairs broken, cupboards flung open, bedding torn, firewood dumped into the hearth and left unburnt. Evelyn stepped over a shattered plate, then saw it, scrawled into the far wall with charcoal. Bring her back, or they all die. Beneath it, a name. Slade. Dakota froze. Evelyn whispered, "You know that name?" His jaw clenched. "Slade is not a man," he said. "He's a disease. We thought he died 5 winters ago." Her knuckles whitened on her blade. "He was at the mine." "No, but he was behind it. He's the one the scarred man worked for." "Then we didn't cut off the head," she muttered. "Just a hand." Dakota nodded once. "And now the head's coming." They found Pebble by the creek, alive. Barely. The poor animal's leg had been twisted cruelly, a warning. Evelyn gently lifted him, wrapping him in a blanket. She didn't cry, not then, but as they buried the ashes of the cabin's doorframe, the only piece left burned. She looked at the earth and whispered, "We have to end this." Dakota said nothing, only wrapped her hand in his and gave a single nod. Slade wasn't the kind of man who made public appearances. He was the kind who bought other men to do his work. The kind who left silver coins in leather pouches and expected the world to bow. He had no origin story, no past people could point to. He just was. A shadow in the cracks of the West. But Dakota knew something. 3 nights from now, he said, spreading a hand-drawn map on the stump outside where the cabin used to be. He'll be in Junctiontown. There's a rail shipment heading east. Slade's men guard it personally. Slaves? Evelyn asked. Worse, Dakota said. Weapons. That night they set out. No horses this time. They moved like ghosts. Evelyn had once hated silence. Now it was armor. Junctiontown was too pretty to be evil. The kind of place with trimmed hedges, clean streets, little girls skipping rope, shopkeepers tipping their hats. But underneath it all was a rot Evelyn could feel in her bones. They scouted the rail yard first. 3 boxcars, 4 guards per car, all armed. One wore a badge, not law, private militia. Dakota narrowed his eyes. He's here. They waited till nightfall, then moved. Evelyn struck first, an arrow through the lamppost to plunge the yard into darkness. Screams, confusion. Dakota dropped from the rafters of the water tower like a hawk, cracking skulls, and wrenching rifles from shocked hands. Evelyn sprinted along the rail line, leaping onto a moving cart, slashing with speed and grace. She didn't hesitate. She didn't hold back. They breached the final car, and there he was, Slade, sitting on a crate of rifles, smoking a cigar like the world owed him a favor. He smiled when he saw her. I was hoping you'd come, he said, standing slowly. You caused quite a bit of trouble, Miss Evelyn. Or should I say, Miss Hawthorne? She froze. That name. I know who you are, he said smoothly. Born in Missouri. Father a blacksmith. Mother died of fever. You ran off at 17. Because no man would marry a girl who could beat him at arm wrestling. Dakota snarled, stepping forward. Slade raised a hand. Easy now. I'm not here to fight. Evelyn spat. Then die quickly. He laughed. No. See? I'm a businessman, and I'm here to offer you a job. Evelyn blinked. You've got a gift, Slade said, gesturing at the carnage outside. Most people don't survive me. You've made it, 3 times now? I admire that. I'd rather die than work for you, he shrugged. Death's still on the table. Evelyn's grip tightened on her blade. Slade leaned in. Here's the truth. The world is changing. No room for sentiment. No room for justice. Only for those strong enough to take what they want. He gestured to Takoda. Men like him? Relics. He's got honor, tradition. But this isn't a world for warriors anymore. It's for kings. You're no king, Evelyn said. Slade smiled thinly. I could be. If I had someone like you beside me. She didn't answer. She just threw her knife. It buried in his shoulder. He screamed, staggered back. Takoda surged forward, but Slade drew a pistol and fired blindly. Takoda collapsed. Blood soaked his tunic. Evelyn screamed, lunging forward, but Slade kicked a lever behind him, and the floor of the boxcar dropped. She fell into darkness. She woke hours later, chained in the mine, the same mine they had freed. It had been reoccupied in days. Slade was nothing if not efficient. But this, time. She was alone. No Takoda, no allies. Just a damp floor and a dull ache in her side. A woman in the shadows whispered, "You shouldn't have come back." Evelyn turned her head. "Who are you?" "Another you," the woman said. "Too strong to break, too stubborn to kill. So they bury us." Evelyn's fingers flexed around the chain. "I'm not staying." She tested the shackle. Loose, rusted. She'd made mistakes. But letting this continue wouldn't be one of them. She waited, listened, used the pickaxe left just out of reach to pry the shackle open with her boot. One chain off, then the other. Then silence as she crept through the tunnels again. And as she rose from the mine like a reborn phoenix, face streaked with grime, eyes glowing with fury, she whispered into the night, "I'm coming for you." At dawn, Takoda stumbled into Dry Creek, alive. Barely. The bullet had grazed his ribs. Broken 3, but he survived. He found the boy they had saved, and the woman with him. "She's been taken," he rasped. The boy nodded. "Then we're going back." The woman raised a rifle. "You're not going alone." Back at the mine, Slade stood above the ridge, sipping tea. He watched his workers dig. Then he felt the earth hum. An arrow thunked into the post beside him. Then another. Then, boom. The side of the mine exploded in flame. Men screamed, "Out of!" The smoke came Evelyn, and behind her, 20 armed townsfolk, Takoda, the boy, even the elderly man with the limp. They weren't soldiers, but they were done being afraid. Slade backed away, fury in his face. "You don't get it," he roared. This world belongs to men like me." Evelyn raised her bow. "No," she said, "it belongs to the people." And she loosed the final arrow, straight through his throat. The mine burned. Chains melted in the fire. Slade's empire collapsed in a single day. Evelyn sat beside Takoda as the flames danced. "You could have died," she whispered. "I'd die for you," he said. She looked away, emotion tightening her face. "You still want to be married to someone like me?" she asked. "After all this?" Takoda took her hand. "Especially after all this." She blinked, then nodded once. They stood. The sky turned pink with morning, and the land sighed, as if grateful. The land took a long time to heal. The fire from the mine smouldered for days. Charcoal smoke curled against the hills, thick and sharp, a grim reminder of what had lived in those tunnels, and what had finally been buried for good. The people of Dry Creek, those who had once whispered in fear behind shuttered windows, walked freely now, heads held high. No more bags of coins slipped under doors, no more missing daughters. Slade's grip had snapped like brittle bone. But, for Evelyn, peace was not as simple as fire and ashes. It was in the way her hand still twitched for a blade in the middle of the night, how she'd wake with sweat at her brow, still expecting chains at her wrists, or firelight flickering across a cave wall. The war was over, but the wounds remained. Some healed. Some she wasn't sure ever would. Still, she tried. She and Takoda, rebuilt the cabin together. It was smaller than the last one, but warmer somehow. Built with their own hands, their own sweat. No hidden doors, no shadows in the corners. Just a one-room space with wide windows, a sturdy roof, and wildflowers planted in a ring around the front. On the morning of the first frost, Dakota came in from chopping wood, his coat dusted with white, and found her staring into a cracked mirror. She stood tall, arms folded, jaw set like stone. Her dress hung untouched on the peg behind her. She wore her usual clothes, leather vest, buckskin pants, a thick belt with a hunting knife at her hip. Her hair was pulled back in a braid, and her hands were still calloused from work. She didn't turn when she spoke. "This is how I want them to see me." Dakota didn't ask who they were. He stepped forward and said softly, "Then that's exactly how you'll be seen." She turned, and when he offered his hand, she took it. The ceremony was small. The townsfolk had begged to throw a celebration. After all, Evelyn had become something of a legend, but she refused anything grand. She didn't want parades or praise. She wanted peace. So they married by the creek, where they had first spoken without a blade between them. Dakota wore the single feather from his father's headdress. Evelyn wore a blue sash given to her by the girl they had saved from the mine, now living with the family from the church, thriving.